I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my photo chats. Hey, today I'm going to talk about when film tanks go bad. Did you know they can go bad? I didn't. I used to do some work for the Air National Guard and the Air Force, making videos and still photographs. And one of the things that the safety director said to me was, we all train as fighter pilots or as technicians, we all train for what can go wrong. But resiliency is about training for what you don't know can go wrong. And that's what happened to me recently. I was out in Brooklyn for a photo shoot for a commercial client, and while I was there, I stopped into New Jersey, photographed some towns inside Princeton, inside a small town across from New Hope, Pennsylvania called Lambertville, where I used to live. And I shot in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And Manhattan was so much fun. And Manhattan was, the first thought was, it's easy to get people in Boulder, where everything is pretty much like a big shopping mall, walking around fancy stores outside. It's easy to get people to say yes. Can I get them in New York, where there's a little bit more of a wall up? People are known not to be talking to each other as they're walking down the street. They pretty much stay to themselves to create some safety. And I went to Brooklyn, or I'm sorry, I went to Manhattan, and while I was there, I went into Madison Square Park. And I walked around with the Rolleiflex. And the first person I asked said no. But the rest all said yes. And I ended up photographing 12 frames on a roll of 120 with the Rolleiflex. And then I ended up in Princeton, Lambertville, and Brooklyn doing the rest. But when I got back, I, of course, developed the film. And the first roll I developed was the Manhattan roll. And I got the dark tent out. I used a Harrison tent. I put the film tank in. I put the film in. I put my arms in. I loaded the film onto the reel. I put the reel into the tank. I put the tank lid on, made sure the cap was on, opened the dark tent, and it brought out the film canister, film tank, so I could go develop the film. And then I mixed the chemicals up, and then I poured the chemicals in, and when I pulled off the chemical cap, I could see the reels. Or the reel, there's only one in there. I could see the reel. Why am I seeing the reel? It appears the lid of the tank, I use metal tanks, has a part underneath of it that makes it so that the liquid has to go around this part underneath of it. And it's riveted on. I've never seen one come off. That part was still in the dark Harrison tent. I didn't notice when I lifted up the lid that the lid was lighter because that part was no longer attached. I didn't hear that part fall out of the lid. I didn't know that there was any way that that could come apart. It's a metal lid with a metal piece underneath of it, and the metal piece underneath of it came off. Sitting in the tent, I put the lid on with the cap, but it didn't have the light protection. You don't know sometimes what you don't know. And I'll put a photo into the show notes. You can see the 5 rolls of film. 4 look pretty good. 1 looks all fogged. That's the Manhattan roll. Things happen. Was I sad that happened? Of course. I wanted those photographs. I met some great people there. I'm assuming each one thinks only I didn't make it. They don't know that there's something else that went wrong. When people say there was a problem with the lab, they're like, yeah, it's just an excuse. This is a real problem with the lab. It wasn't something I could have been watching for, although from now on I'll always make sure that there's a second part to that lid. But I had no idea that could come apart. I had no idea that could fall off. When you're loading your film, if you're using metal tanks, make sure that bottom piece is on there. And then maybe you won't have that experience. But the point is, we can only plan for what we think we can plan for. And sometimes other things happen. And then you end up with photos that aren't going to work out because you fogged your film with the light. It was the first roll of film, and it was like, oh, come on. I want that raw film. I wanted my Manhattan portraits. So if you were there that day and I photographed you, that's why. And I'm sorry. But I'll be back. But the point is, things happen. And we move on. We have to make the next photo. And we have to make the next photo. And I'll watch for the lid from now on. But things happen. I'll put some photos of the lid too. You'll see what came apart and why. It doesn't ever seem like it could happen, but it did. Didn't make a sound. Didn't change the weight when I'm putting it on the lid. I didn't notice it. Any one of those might have helped me save it, but they didn't. Anyway. Hey, that's today's Photography Talk. Hey, if you could support, hit the Patreon. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. I'll be back next week. We'll talk more photography. As always, here's the good light.